What's up everybody and welcome back to Joystick Ayrton. Today's video is about the GPD Win Mini and I could not be more excited about this. It's truly a video about a year and a half in the making for me. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a different review. Not only are we going to talk about the performance on this GPD Win Mini, but we're also going to talk about its battery life, but we're really going to steer it towards my experience. So through buying the device off of IndieGoGo, through the experience I had dealing with GPD directly when I bought the Win4 and had a faulty unit and had to go through an entire warranty period. We're going to talk about all of those things and we're going to kind of steer it towards the games I was playing. Resident Evil 5, Fallout 3, Age of Empires 3, Civilization. But we're also going to talk about games like Elden Ring. We're going to talk about its issues with the AMD drivers. We're going to talk about battery life. We got a lot to talk about here. We're going to talk about little accessories that I think you should get for it, and whether or not it's kind of worthwhile for you. You can really only get this device through the IndieGoGo page or through AliExpress if you live here in the States. So maybe you don't even know who GPD is in general. So we're going to start from ground zero. We're going to talk about GPD as a company. Then we're going to talk about my experience with the Win4, and then we're going to dive hard into benchmarks and different things with the device itself. So with all of that being said, we can finally start getting the ball rolling, because it's been almost a year and a half since I wanted the GPD 2023 version for the Win Mini. And here we are with the 2024 with a bunch of upgrades, but also kind of a backtrack in some ways too. So we'll talk about all of the shortcomings and there's a lot to cover. So let's go ahead and start the ball rolling. So who is GPD? GPD is Gamepad Digital. It's a very small handheld company out of China. They've been around for a long time though. They really were the first ones to start putting PC handhelds together back towards 2016, before the Steam Deck, before anybody else was really taking a Windows-based device and putting it in a handheld. They're also one of the only companies doing clamshell devices and all kinds of different things. It's really a unique section of the market, and it's a relatively small one. All of their stuff really goes through IndieGoGo. There are some side sales on like AliExpress and things of that nature, but if you're here in the States, you're getting it through AliExpress, IndieGoGo, or secondhand market. So with that being said, what is the Win Mini? So the Win Mini is a clamshell device. It's a 7-inch touchscreen, but it comes with a full-fledged keyboard, and it comes with joysticks, triggers, right bumpers, L4, R4, has everything you could need inside of just basically what is a 7-inch mini laptop. So with all of that being said, it might scare you away from considering to buy the product. And I can totally understand that. Maybe you don't even know what IndieGoGo or AliExpress are. So that's what we're going to talk about next. But with that being said, I'm also going to link in the description down below the reviews that I watched that really kind of convinced me, not just for the Win Mini, but back when I took the risk of, man, this is a $1,000 Win4 on AliExpress. Is it worth the gamble? And what kind of convinced me that that was all okay? So let's talk about IndieGoGo, AliExpress, and whether it's really worth your risk. Okay, so let's talk about AliExpress really quick. It is just a marketplace. It is no different than Amazon. There's a couple important things to keep in mind. If you do not want to get scammed, it could be like eBay or like Amazon, but most of the time AliExpress is going to back the consumer. So with that being said, you'll get a 2-week return policy. I used that in my situation with GPD when I had the Win4 and was having a bunch of issues with it. Talk more about that later. But another way to make sure that you're in the clear, depending on what you're buying, is going directly through the manufacturer's marketplace store. So let's say I had an Amazon store and you were buying something directly from me. I would then be using that storefront to sell you a product. You would have security on buying that product from Amazon. Same thing works with like eBay. If you're going through them, eBay is going to back the buyer most of the time. So if you go directly through the manufacturer's AliExpress store like GPD's or Ioneo's or Ambernix, then you're going to have, not only are you dealing directly with the manufacturer of that product, but you're also going to be backed by AliExpress themselves. So it's not as scary as it seemed. Things actually went pretty well, but you do want to make sure you're going directly through the manufacturer's store, not some third-party random guy who you have no idea how he actually obtained those devices. It is going to be more expensive on AliExpress than it is on IndieGoGo, but you're also not taking the same risk that you are on IndieGoGo. So with that being said, let's talk about IndieGoGo. IndieGoGo is somewhere where you're backing startup projects, basically. IndieGoGo is very upfront that you are not actually buying anything when you give money to any company. You are backing the project. You may or may not get that product, and that is not up to IndieGoGo to maintain. You're donating them your money so they can finish that project in hopes that you get X, Y, or Z, and that is totally up to you and the company that you're working with, not with IndieGoGo. So you can see how that can get skewed all over the place. Now you will be able to tell. They kind of tell you what stores and what companies have brought their products to market and have backed their buyers and have done right by the community. And GPD has been flawless. They have been campaign after campaign after campaign, pushing out, and just really, sometimes it takes a little longer than everybody hopes. The Win Mini that I backed, the 2024 model, I was supposed to get this in April. I ended up getting it in the beginning of June. So, I mean, it might take a little bit longer sometimes, but that's all, you know, kind of the backing for these small companies. It takes time and takes a lot of money for them to be able to do this. Lenovo, Asus, Steam, they have just a ton of capital and do all of this in-house. That's not how that works exactly for companies like GPD, Ambernick, INEO. So with that being said, I've done both. I had a good experience with AliExpress. I paid more money. It was somewhat annoying on IndieGoGo, just waiting and waiting and waiting, but GPD took care of me. They answered all the questions I had about the device on their page and the time frame and when it was getting shipped, and it worked out flawlessly. There's no return program with IndieGoGo. With AliExpress, within that 2-week time frame, you have an issue with it, you can return it, no questions asked. You can't do that with IndieGoGo. They will supply you with that 1-year warranty and try and take care of you, but it's not going to be like the same experience on AliExpress where you just have a 2-week return policy. So with that being said, now it's time to jump into all of the fun things that you can do with the Win Mini. Ergonomics. This is going to be an extremely quick section for the video. And with that being said, you might hate it, you might love it. Retro Game Corps is always talking about how he loves the overall package and how tight it is on this device or other clamshells. But he prefers the candy bar style Legion Go, Steam Deck, Rog Ally ergonomics overall. With that being said, it's completely subjective. I absolutely love it. If you add the added in grips that they send with it, it feels just like any other handheld there. It's absolutely awesome. There's one reason that I don't do that, and that is because when you have the device sitting at about 90 degrees, give or take, on the hinge, it stands up just fine with the grips on it, but as you get closer, back and back and back with that hinge, it will start to teeter-totter. And as I'm playing, and then I just set the device down all the time. So that's why I don't use the grips. One other thing to keep in mind here is when you're holding this device, it can kind of dig into the center of your palm with these edges here. I'd like to see them a little bit more rounded without having the grips, but I prefer not having the grips, but I absolutely love the ergonomics. I have no issues with it whatsoever. I don't have the biggest hands on the planet, so that's not a problem, but hopefully I did my job while editing this video and added in a bunch of different pictures and gameplay with the grips and without the grips. It's so subjective. But with that being said, another thing to keep in mind, you're not going to be normally typing on this keyboard. You're going to be doing some thumb typing, but you can reach everything with your thumbs, the trackpad, so on and so forth. So ergonomics on a clamshell are always going to be up for interpretation. If you think you'd love it, that's one thing. For me, I did love it. But if you're looking for something more like a candy bar, but you're kind of looking on different companies, looking for a different style, the Win4 is awesome as well, but I love this. I love the ergonomics. I think it's great. So with that being said, let's move on. All right, so we're about 10 minutes into the video and we're finally going to talk about some benchmarks. So with that being said, we also need to talk about the software that is on the device that allows you to alter the battery and the sticks and all of that. So there's two different pieces of software on here. Motion Assist allows you to change all kinds of things. It allows you to set up gyro. It allows you to set up different TDPs, and it is bare bones, but it allows you to do a lot of in-depth work. It is nowhere near what Legion Space is, and it is not even remotely close to the same planet that Armory Crate is. So with that being said, if you are okay with bare bones software, all the software on this device works really well, but it is archaic. Feels like it's straight out of 1990s Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 2000. It feels super, super old. With that being said, I played a bunch of different games on here. So I went all the way back to Fallout 3. I've almost finished that and all the DLC. I've been playing Resident Evil 5. I've been picking up on some of my saves from Elden Ring and a bunch of different titles. So I'm just going to start throwing up different games, talking about those benchmarks and showing some battery life. So let's go ahead and jump on into that. With all of that, Elden Ring plays pretty much flawlessly. One thing that I do for all of these benchmarks is I only play at 720p. You can play at 1080p, but for me personally, on a 7-inch display, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't look that much better, and it not only drastically drains your battery, but it really hits the performance as well. On Elden Ring, at 15 watts, you can see 60 FPS across the game with no issues whatsoever running high settings. It's a flawless experience, and it is awesome, and you can typically get pretty dang close to about 2 hours of battery life. On games just like Cyberpunk and on Elden Ring, I had some crashes, but pretty much the exact same performance, about 30 FPS, 35 FPS on Cyberpunk, but there are a couple issues about those crashes. So with that being said, this device supports updates from AMD through the AMD Adrenalin software. A couple issues with that is they don't always work. And you don't have like Lenovo or Asus back there trying to fix it for you. So what does that mean? You got to kind of tinker with some things. And AMD fluid motion frames is actually what was causing most of those crashes. So if you have this device and you're wondering why is it crashing on Elden Ring or Cyberpunk or most of these new titles, turn off fluid motion frames and you'll probably have a much better experience. Going into older titles, Fallout 3, I'm at 120 FPS pretty much all the time at 15 to 18 watts with pretty much no issues whatsoever. You can see that in Quake 4 and Resident Evil 5 and games that are just not as graphically demanding. When you start really raunching it up a bit, it can start to take a tumble. But you can, for the most part, on these older titles, Fallout 3, Resident Evil 5, so on and so forth, you can get 60 FPS at 8 to 12 watts with pretty much 3 hours of gameplay, and that's almost as good as it's going to get in most of the batteries that are about 50 watts. Now I kind of wanted to stumble into some different games. I wanted to look at some strategy games like Civ 6, AoE. I also wanted to look at like different just crazy shenanigans like Subnautica and things of that nature. So with that being said, RTS games are a lot more difficult than your typical game. So what you're going to do in that scenario is change from gamepad mode over to mouse mode, and then you're going to go in and alter those different settings. So you're going to take your left stick and make it WASD. You're going to make all your other buttons, your other commands that you may or may not need. The only game I didn't have any issues with out of the box was Civ 6. When I moved over to mouse mode, everything pretty much functioned as I needed it to. A little bit slower than I would have liked it, moving and panning across the map, but still at the end of the day, really well. I was able to do this in Company of Heroes as well, and Age of Empires 3 and 4 with pretty much no issues, and it's not the same experience you're going to get on a desktop. You're not going to be able to move things as fast, and you're probably not going to be able to play on a difficulty nearly as high, but it's still pretty good, and I really enjoyed it. So with that being said, we're going to move out, talk a little bit more about battery life, and wrap this whole thing up. Okay, so when it comes to the benchmarks and everything, it's an 8840U. It's a little more power hungry than the 7840U, but the performance is pretty much on par. The 2023 version and the 2024 version of this device are pretty much neck and neck. The only difference is really being the screen, and that's pretty much about it. Being landscape VRR 120, it's awesome. A couple things I wanted to talk about battery life. You are not going to get the same battery life out of this that you would get out of like the Deco LED. It's just humanly impossible. The new ROG Ally X, double the battery life. This is a 45 watt hour battery. That's an 80, but you're sacrificing a lot for having such a small clamshell device. I now want to talk about the things that aren't so great, but let me backtrack 1 second. Almost every indie title, Hollow Knight, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Dead Cells, those titles play amazing. They feel great, they look great, and they're flawless, and they're awesome. So Unravel is great. Older titles, Dead Space is great. All of that thing, they play flawlessly. They play forever, and you can play them on an 8 to 10 watt, and you can get incredible amounts of battery life out of them. So flawless gameplay, in my opinion, and I thought it was great. And you can see that through the gameplay footage that we put on. So with that being said, I now want to talk about the downfalls. So there's one major downfall, and that comes with the recessed sticks. So with this device, you're always going to have some kind of downfalls. You're taking ergonomics or you're taking size over X, Y, or Z. And these sticks are really the biggest one. Now, they don't bother me nearly as much, but getting like Joy-Con caps on them does massively improve them, but there's a giant drawback from that. And that's that with certain caps, most of them in my experience, I bought 10 different sets, you won't get full motion anymore. So like where you can get full running Fallout 3, you're moving straight forward, you put the stick on, or the cap on, now you're only getting 90% of the motion of the stick itself, and you're no longer able to run. So that's one of the massive downfalls of this. That, battery life on newer titles, and ergonomics. Those are the few things that are going to fall by the side, as well as official support for different, software and things that you would get from Steam Deck, Asus, and Lenovo. With that being said, I'm totally fine with that. That's why I wanted this device. I wanted something so ergonomically small, compact. I travel an incredible amount. So for me, this is an amazing device. It's perfect. Everything worked out. I have no issues with it. IndieGoGo worked out. That might not be the same experience. So it's all kind of, I think this is an amazing device, and I think everybody, if they're in the market for something quirky, something different, something unique, should definitely pick one of these up. If you're your average player who wants support, who doesn't want to tinker with things, doesn't want to have to go through a bunch of hoops, stick with Steam, stick with Lenovo, stick with Asus. Maybe MSI's new 8 Claw is going to be good and have that support that you need as well. You can go through a third party like Best Buy with no issues, or Micro Center. You can't do that here. So keep all of that in mind. I absolutely love the device. I think it's awesome. I barely touch my Legion Go anymore. I wanted to pick up a Deck OLED, but I'm just not sure it would get used. And honestly, this is everything that I could have imagined it being. It's an awesome device, ergonomically great, performance is awesome, battery life is what I needed it to be, and I could actually not be any happier. So it's really something unique, something fun, something that I've greatly enjoyed. It is my favorite handheld I've had to date. With that being said, there's not going to be major improvements to the device over its lifetime. It's pretty much what it is that I got. And we'll see what happens in the next iteration of the device. And I really want to get a Win Max too, but I really don't think I would ever use such a big device in handheld fashion. I love sitting on the couch and playing this thing. So with all of that being said, if you picked up a Win Mini or maybe a GPD device in general, let me know in the comments section down below. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on not only the device, but this video, the channel, and anything else you can think of down there as well. And with that being said, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.